Welcome to the Holy Rebellion. Welcome back to the Holy Rebellion. Travis here with me. Thank you, Travis. Good to see you again.
Man, it's good to be here, Christian.
So we recently got the feedback that sometimes our conversation feels like Sunday school. And we both cringe on the inside when we hear that. And so we're trying something different, something new, something fun. So that's what you're going to hear today. So hopefully it's way better and way less like Sunday school.
We're going to show you what we wish Sunday school looked like.
Yeah.
I actually don't know. I don't know if that's true, but
so what's funny is I'm now a Sunday school teacher, like to the adults.
And I also it's ward conference right now, and so I am teaching all of the second hour across all the wards in our stake. So I too, at least for this season.
So we're getting it out of our system so that you don't have to hear about it.
Yep. Absolutely.
So we're giving you the best of the best. The one thing I did want to mention, I had a dad joke that I just got to get out. You'll see I've been growing my hair out. It's longer than it's been in forever. It doesn't even look that long, but it's super long for me. Yeah. And it was for President's Day. I was just trying to get the George Washington, and here we are. I love the man. So,
well, dude, you got a ways to go, I think, to match the general, but I think it's a worthy cause for sure.
Well, I'll do what it takes. We're on the path. So to kick this off, we want to jump into a current event. And this is honestly, I struggle with this one so much because I don't know what people are talking about. I go online and I search and I literally cannot find something interesting that people are talking about. So I kind of just found my own that isn't so interesting to maybe to most people, but to me, it's so cool. I really think that it's a pivotal moment in the nation's history, actually. So today marks the 80th anniversary of the battle on Iwo Jima in World War II. Yeah. And so I was doing some research on this, and I didn't know this, but it's a volcanic island off Japan that was a strategic point that would either advance the war or we would just kind of get stuck there and stalemated at that point. So it was pivotal, but it was an 8 square mile volcanic island. So it's really not that big. And we deployed 70,000 Marines, which is the largest deployment of Marines we've ever had in one battle. And there was only 26,000 Japanese on the island, and most of them had sworn or covenanted to fight to the death. And they were entrenched in the tunnels and the lava tubes. And it was a horrific battle. And lots of people died. In fact, I think I was reading, it was something like 26,000 Marines were injured, which is something like 40%. And then on top of that, there was about 7,000 who died. And so major, massive casualties. And that's where we get the picture and the image, that statue of the 6 Marines raising the flag on Iwo Jima. And to me, that is one of the most inspiring sights. And it's so cool to me that men would go literally to hell, an 8-mile volcanic island of hell, and fight to the death for freedom. And I just thank God for men and women who do that. And I'm so grateful for our country and the freedoms we enjoy and the people who uphold those freedoms. So that is my current event. And I just wanted to express some gratitude that I'm so grateful because, man, that's courage. That's bravery.
It is. And you know what's crazy? I was talking about that with my brother this past week. We're both kind of history nerds a little bit. And I'm going to butcher this. So someone go and fact check us and send us a message, but
just believe us. Don't fact check it.
Just believe everything we say. It was something like every 6 square feet, an American was wounded or killed to take you.
Holy cow.
I mean, that's lay one guy down and rotate him 360 degrees. And that's how many men it cost to take that island, which is madness.
Yeah.
That was part of the reason that at least it was one of the pieces, one of the variables that led to us deciding it was worth dropping the atomic bombs. It was our first sight at this is how fiercely they're going to defend their land. We're going to have to take a different course. So terrible. And like you said, courageous, heroic, all of it sort of folded into one messy.
Yeah, man, war is awful. But some things are worse than war, which is why I think that war is sometimes necessary. And this is a side note. I did just recently watch Oppenheimer. Pretty good movie. There's some stuff in there that
Me
you
too.
probably don't need to see. Did you?
Yeah. Hey, you VidAngel stuff. And dude, I don't even know what you're talking about. It just glazes right over it.
You're a better man than I. I just fast forward real quick through the things I don't want to see. I mean, what a movie. Also, like I think Oppenheimer said that somewhere in the neighborhood of 200,000 people died as a result of those bombs, which like, I don't know how you weigh costs and benefits and what justifies something like that. But I mean, man, it's never been heavier to me. And I don't know how you make a decision like that one way or the other. I don't know. That's outside of my capability, but I'm grateful for the men who fought and my heart just aches for those who suffer in war and, receive bombs. Holy cow.
Yeah.
Incredible.
Yeah, there's an interesting line towards the end of that movie.
Yeah.
That he was, well, we might be thinking the same thing, maybe different, but he was feeling this heavy weight and he went and met with the president. And he like explains how heavy he was feeling because he created the bomb. And the president says something like, no one cares at all about who you were. I pressed the button.
Yeah. They
So
care
like,
who
don't
dropped the
come at
bomb.
me with like this pity party. Like, people are looking at me. I'm the one who pressed
Yeah.
it. Get out of my office. And it's interesting like that. I don't know. I think it's part of being a boy and growing into men. I think most men probably are still this way, but like there's something that we see in battle and war that like women don't see. And I think when we're boys, it's only glory and courage and
Heroism.
bravery.
Yeah.
Yeah. Like when I was a boy, dude, I was just like eating up anything and everything I could about battle. It's like a wonder that all of us don't go and join the army because like there's something so heroic that you witness and like that's what courage and bravery looks like, that you would crawl over that thing under fire and save your brother. Like it's amazing.
Yeah.
And the older I've gotten, the more of like the tragedy has like weighed on me. And so it's interesting to now view historical events and consider both things of like, holy smokes, look at that courage and bravery. And what an incredible tragedy that bravery had to be shown.
I've actually seen this in real life recently. My son, Finn, is 5, and he is just the most boy there's ever been. And we've been reading a book called Way of the Warrior Kid. It was by Jocko. He wrote a couple of kids' books. They're awesome. And it just teaches the warrior code. The warrior is tough and brave and stands up for the weak. And in this book, this kid is learning how to do pull-ups and push-ups. And Finn the other day is like, Dad, I want a pull-up bar. And I want to do pull-ups till my hands bleed. And I was like, dang, I want that for you because like, it's so cool. Like that's glorious. He's just, we just want that as men. There was another line, and then I'll let you go. I'm sorry to sidetrack us so far.
I love it.
But there was another line in that movie when he has a conversation with Albert Einstein where he brings this formula and he says, there's like a non-zero probability that we could start a chain reaction that destroys the entire world. And then they come back to that conversation later at the very end of the movie, and Albert Einstein says, well, I guess you didn't kill everybody. You didn't destroy the entire world. Or no. Oppenheimer says, you remember how I said we might start a chain reaction that destroys the world? And Albert says, yeah. And he says, I think we did. It's like, oh, because now there's like this arms race. It's heavy, dude. It's heavy. But I'm grateful for brave men and brave women who fight for other people. I love that.
Yeah. And me too. My wife and I were going to London in April, and we are going to, there's a train. This is like people that are cultured. This is obvious to you. They all know this, but there's a train from London to Paris. It goes under the English Channel.
Oh, I had no idea.
It's called the Channel. It's amazing. It's incredible.
I love English.
And so it only takes like 2 hours and 20 minutes to take the train to Paris. So obviously you have to. But I bring this up because I learned that there's day trips from Paris to Normandy which is where, for those who are less boyish than Christian and I, is where D-Day happened in World War II, and the Allies stormed the beaches to begin the recapturing of Europe. And that's like not something that Catherine cares that much about. Like,
Dude,
right,
I'll go with you.
she'd
Tell her to
probably
stay home.
she'd probably rather spend the day in Paris. But I'm like, I think we have to go to Normandy. Like, for me, going and seeing the beaches and the bunkers that were like such terrible forces of destruction, and to look at the crosses and uh, uh, the tombstones with the
Graves.
Jewish
Yeah.
stars, right? Like all of these graves, it's gonna be sacred. Like, I think we have to go.
Gotta shed
Um,
a tear.
uh, they're just these boys. Like, they were all younger than us, man. They were all like 20-year-old
Yeah.
boys who just like, most of them were probably scared out of their wits, just like wishing that they could go home, but they were doing their duty.
Yeah.
And the incredible stories of heroism, and not to mention the liberation of a people. It's incredible.
Yeah. There's a high cost
Yeah,
for what we enjoy today.
there is. And it's actually an interesting transition to my current event. That I wish I had like an amazing takeaway, but it's highly related to what we're talking about. And there's just our current political atmosphere is so crazy in the United States of America. I have texts going back and forth with different family members and different things, and I do know that you and I voted for different people in this past election, and so we probably feel differently about certain things. But Trump recently tweeted out this quote. He maybe was quoting Napoleon, I'm not sure, but he said something like, "He who frees his country commits no crime." And to me, it sounds like it was taken straight out of a totalitarian
It's a
playbook.
Disney villain quote.
Yeah,
Gotta be.
yeah, it's like straight out of a totalitarian quote book. Like,
Yeah.
I can do no wrong so long as I'm freeing my people. And we're kind of like, freeing us from what? And so I know that a lot of people would like, it's a really touchy issue, right? Like, people view politics really differently. We all consume different information that makes us believe different things. But it's interesting, right? You talking about that freedom and the high cost of freedom. And I think whether it's President Trump or any president, I think it's important for us all to remember that the United States of America isn't immune to corrupt leaders. It's not immune to one day crumbling upon itself, right? Like, we've been blessed to witness the greatest experience and experiment of human freedom in the history of the world. But we're not immune to it all crumbling down. And so I think that's my current event, is like, for us all to be mindful and to pay attention. And my biggest prayer would be that we like could just put to bed our political arguments based on parties, because I think that's where we struggle to see clearly. Yeah, it's interesting to read things, in the Book of Mormon. Our Captain Moroni, who fought valiantly to defend his freedoms. We talked about a few examples in the world history. There is a pretty clear cut between who is the good guy and who is the bad guy in some of these wars. And gratefully, we were the good guys in some of those. Some conflicts, maybe it wasn't so clear if we were good guys or bad guys. I think most of the time we were trying to do good,
Yeah.
world. And I just pray that continues to be the case for the red, white, and blue.
Yeah. Your outlook seems dim.
I'm nervous. Yeah, I'm nervous. I think that, yeah, like I said, I just don't think we're immune to it. And I think that there's almost like a new rallying cry amongst many in our country that is like, well, if we have to tear it all down, then so be it.
Yeah.
And I'm like,
let's not do that.
What happens when you tear it all down? Like, that we have witnessed dozens of times in world history. power vacuum and totalitarianism every time. So like, I don't know if we want to tear it down, but that messaging is frighteningly popular right now.
So here's the internal debate I always have. I have none of that experience because I've consumed none of that media, zero on either side. I just read that 1440 email that tells me President Trump did this, but it doesn't tell me how to feel about it. And sometimes like, I mean, that doesn't sound so bad, or maybe I don't love that, but I don't have somebody else telling me that this is the end, or somebody else telling me we have to rally. Like, now is the time. It's like I have none of that in my ear, and I feel free from that anxiety. And maybe I'm not doing my part as a citizen, so I don't know, because like my outlook is my family and we're doing great, and we're going to continue to do so. But and maybe I'm sacrificing some of my duty in order to have those things. I don't know if that's right, but I've experienced none of that, and I feel pretty good.
Yeah. Can I tell you, I don't know the answer to that.
Yeah.
That is generally true for me too. Like, I just don't know what's going on. And I don't know the answer. I don't know. I really don't know. Like, where's the line between being a responsible citizen and being an undistracted, like, I know what I'm about and I know what path I'm on, and that actually is just a distraction. Somewhere those two like frames overlap, but I'm with you. I actually don't know where it is.
Spot.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, I'm sorry. But let me tell you that Jesus has a plan, and that plan will not be frustrated. And regardless of where it goes, he's coming back.
Yeah.
So the best is yet to come, my friend.
Yeah, and that actually is that truly is my takeaway. That I always circle back to when with conversations like this. There were small windows in my life where conversations like this were really exciting to me, because it was like, oh, this sounds like the end of times is happening. Like, if everything crumbles, then like that's sounding like prophecy, and then Jesus is coming back. So it's like, can we like speed this up? This is pretty awesome. And really, like, I don't think I'm like trying to press the fast forward button anymore. But that to me is the biggest takeaway of like, we already know things in the world are going to get ugly. And things beyond our power to control or manipulate, it's just going to get ugly. And I am incredibly grateful that we know that truth, that the Savior will come again. And can you believe him reigning personally on the earth?
You know what's so cool is that no, I can't, but I'm so excited for it. But in maybe 2 conferences ago, the prophet President Nelson said that we will, in the upcoming years, we will see the greatest manifestations of God's power that's ever existed on the earth. And Carla and I were watching The Chosen. He raised a man from the dead. Like, he healed the blind. He healed the lepers, the legs of the lame. He opened the mouths of the mute. In the restoration of the gospel, there's story after story of angelic ministers coming down to Joseph Smith, and prophets of old giving him power and priesthood, and angels visiting members. And like, there have been absolutely amazing and incredible things that we read about and can only make movies about. Like, because we who has these experiences today? I don't know. But to me, it's so exciting that maybe those are coming back. Maybe we're going to see those. Salt Lake Temple is opening in a year or so, 2 years. Maybe that's going to be like the Nauvoo Temple or the Kirtland Temple, when people saw angels in the rafters. It's like, I don't know that that's going to happen. I won't be disappointed or disenchanted if it doesn't, but it's like, but it could. What if?
Yeah.
So cool.
So very cool. If I don't see angels, dude, I'm out. That's it for me.
There better be an angel.
No, but I do think it's fascinating. The scriptures talk about how, like, if there are no miracles, it's not because God has changed, but it's because our faith has failed us.
Yeah.
And so what I hope is happening, and what I feel happening, in at least in my own heart, and as I've chatted with you and other people who are eager to share their testimonies socially, what I've experienced is that perhaps there is a revival of faith, even amongst the faithful, like an increase of faith that's happening, that people are eager and hopeful and joyful as they anticipate a more faithful, a more focused life, on the Savior. And so I think that's actually required if the best is yet to come.
Yeah. Yeah, I'm with you on that. Cool. So moving on. Next section here. Or did you want to did you have a number 2 there?
Nope.
Okay.
Let's
All
keep
right.
moving.
So we have an apologetics section. So something we ran into that maybe was interesting or controversial, or we weren't quite sure how to respond to. And so I'm going to ask you, Travis, how you would respond to this off the cuff. And maybe you can't, and that's okay, because I had to kind of think and sit on it for a while. But there's been a lot of controversy in the church and outside of the church regarding garments and the wearing of garments, and it's a requirement. It's a question in our interviews to enter the temple, as if we are wearing our garments as instructed. And one of the comments I see, bless the internet, but one of the comments I saw was this, and this one everybody loved this comment, and it was against wearing garments, but it said, the church shouldn't be concerned with my underwear or how or when I'm wearing it. What do you do with that, Travis?
Yeah, I mean, it certainly is a pointed comment. I'm sure it got tons of hearts.
It did. It sure did. Yeah.
Just for the record, like, no one at my church is asking me if I'm, how or when I'm wearing my underwear. So for those of you that are like hearing that for the first time, like, what the people at church are talking about underwear all the time? Not so. The way I think that, at least internally, I would think about that, and would probably need to like think further to articulate it better, that the garment is, when we go through into the temple and we make covenants with God, we clothe ourselves in our covenant. We clothe ourselves in what symbolically is Jesus Christ. And I heard something it was actually the sealing of my sister-in-law getting married to her husband. And the sealer, before they got sealed, said this. He said, I'd invite you, when you put on your garments in the morning, that you consider the covenants that you are dressing yourself in. And it's been a beautiful reminder to me that every day when I'm getting dressed in the morning, right, you can think of like a monk has their vestment, and different religious faiths have their different things that remind them of a lifestyle they've chosen. When I'm getting dressed every single day, I'm reminded of the covenants that I have made with my Savior Jesus Christ to try and align my will and my ambitions with Him in a more perfect way. And so that to me is the beauty of the garment that I personally have really enjoyed, that I'm able to say, today, am I going to sacrifice things that aren't in line with Christ so that I can choose Him in a more full and excellent way? Today, will I kneel and bow and put Him as my first priority and worship Him and Him alone, And so that's how I would respond to general questions about the garment, is how beautiful of an experience it is, specifically to how that individual worded it. I'll talk
to jab.
Yeah.
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 I don't think I could say it any better, and I've thought about this for some time now. But I think that you're spot on, and the way that they word the question just makes it seem so invasive. Like, why do you care if I wear how I wear my underwear? And your garment really isn't underwear. That's not the right way to think about it. That's the problem. Like that's my issue with that statement, is I don't care how you wear your underwear. I do care, though, how you treat your covenants with Jesus Christ. And I care because I love you and I want you to live with Him again. And how we treat our covenants with Jesus Christ will mean all the difference. That doesn't mean like your underwear or the garments are the crux of it. If you don't have it, you're not getting into heaven or anything like that. But it's a symbolic representation of how you treat your agreements or your orientation, your worship of Jesus Christ. And I reading in that thread, I saw somebody in Arizona talking about how um, he hadn't been wearing her garments because it was so hot. And it's just, they were just sweating. And so there's a lot of members apparently who just sometimes choose not to because of comfort. It's hot and it's sweaty. And then she said, I had an experience where I was outside and I saw a female police officer who, had all her gear. She had the clothing, and then she had the bulletproof vest and the gun, and she was just dripping sweat. And she thought, if that girl can wear her physically protective armor in the dead of an Arizona summer, I can put on my garments that spiritually are a protection to me against worshiping anything less than Jesus Christ. And I love that, because it's not about your underwear. It's about the orientation of your entire life. What do you worship? And that's what it comes down to. And so when I put them on, don't always do this, but I should, as they remind me to be a better father and a better husband. They tell me how I should treat my children and the relationship with my wife, and how I should act in business. And it just helps me remember the pattern of being I'm after, and that is a pattern after the being of Jesus Christ.
I'm sure that the person who typed that comment would have some really snarky things to say in response.
They wouldn't care about any of this.
But I found it beautiful.
Thank you. You know what I've seen as I've been in these threads, and I've seen you respond to threads, they legitimately do not care to have a conversation. They're hit and runs. They just want to throw some mud and get out. And if you like poke your head out, they're totally willing to throw a little more mud and get out again. Like, they're not there for discourse, for understanding. It's just for jabs most of the time.
Yeah, it's really fascinating. I have a little bit to comment on like this specifically with what the Spirit is teaching me. So I'll save it. But yeah, the mudslinging is, it's out of control.
Yeah. That is the conversation of the internet.
Yeah, it's like who can chuck more mud, and it doesn't matter. It's like whose mud is based in truth, or who has more mud or less mud. Like, none of that
doesn't matter. Yeah,
it's just like I'm gonna throw this as fast as I can, and then I'm out of here.
It's like, who could have the funniest, snarkiest, meanest comment? You win. You win the internet.
Terrible. Yeah. But yeah, you're right. That's exactly what's happening on the internet. Okay, you ready for mine? How would you respond to this?
Lay it on me. I'm not ready, but let's give it a
go. This one is looking back at church history. It is a question regarding the witnesses of the Book of Mormon. So here is the question of how would you respond to this? Essentially someone who says, you know what, there was no credible witnesses to the Book of Mormon. They were either duped, or they were hallucinating, or what's the other option here? That they were all just like, they were in on the con, right? Like, they were in on it all along. And how would you respond to that?
Like, the snarky internet me would want to say something like, we have more evidence of the Book of Mormon than we do of the resurrection of Jesus Christ. By far. Much more recent.
It is true and snarky.
So I win. But it's maybe not helpful. But I think, like, what they're saying is just factually untrue and dishonest. It's just the reality they're presenting just does not exist, because there were 13 witnesses to the Book of Mormon, many of whom left the church and had all incentive in the entire world to discredit the Book of Mormon, and went to their graves not doing so, testifying of its truth. Like, how do you explain that? There is no explanation other than they truly believed it. And were 13 men duped by the most masterful con men and hypnotists of all time? It's like highly unlikely. It's like, that's a miracle in and of itself. And if you can believe that miracle, why can't you believe that an angel just gave Joseph Smith some plates and he had the power of God to translate it?
Yeah. Hey, I loved your response. We could probably just move on.
Let me know. What did you think? What did you come up with?
In a way, just to there was something like 16 or 17 witnesses, if you include unofficial witnesses. There were 3 witnesses who beheld an angel, and that angel showed them the plates. And there was a table and all this, right? It was like this glorious manifestation. Then there was 8 witnesses who, no angel, but Joseph just like took out the plates, and they were able to like flip through the pages. They were able to lift them up, that sort of thing. And there was others that were unofficial, but that people would see them. Or Emma Smith, for example, went and like it was under a cloth, but she could feel that it was metal, and she could like finger through some of the pages. One that I just learned of, it was I forget her name, but she had a more glorious manifestation where she actually saw a messenger, and that messenger showed her the plates. So it's interesting to think that the 11 witnesses, the 3 witnesses and the 8 witnesses were all men, but many of the unofficial witnesses were actually women that also saw. And so really just interesting stuff. And so I love your point of like, it actually might be easier to believe that, the truth is what Joseph said the truth was, because like just to walk through what would have had to have happened, like, right. So Joseph, he wrote the Book of Mormon, which like
based off a view of the Hebrews or whatever that book is.
Yeah. Which honestly to me is so, trying to be as less snarky as I can, but it's just crazy. It's like, you actually just have to believe that he was the most brilliant writer in the history of planet Earth. Okay. So if you believe that, awesome. Check. Then you have to believe not only was he the greatest writer in the history of planet Earth, but he was able to pull off something that no one's ever pulled off, which is, I'm going to get these 3 guys to hallucinate the same thing. You can't make people hallucinate the same thing because everyone's brain is different and they hallucinate everything.
Hence the hypnotist. He hypnotized them.
Joseph Smith could. So he was a world-class hypnotist.
Yeah.
Amazing. Then you have to go and explain, okay, well, the 8 witnesses didn't see a vision or an angel. They actually just like literally physically held the plates. So then you have to conclude, okay, he also was an expert in metallurgy, and he made these plates, and he chiseled out different things to fool these 8 guys into believing that he actually had them. So you have to believe all of that. And by the way, there's not a shred of evidence for any of
that. Yeah.
There's not a shred of evidence for any of it. So like, not only do you have to believe all of that about him, it just makes you a conspiracist, and congratulations, I guess. But essentially what they're saying is like, Joseph Smith was the most remarkable person to have ever walked the earth. That's what you have to believe.
And this is just the surface. Like you're barely scratching why that is ridiculous, because it just goes deeper and deeper and deeper as you dive into the Book of Mormon itself.
Absolutely. And so for some to just sort of like write it off as to like, oh yeah, they were all duped, or they were all in on it, or whatever, and they just like sort of shrug it away. You can't shrug it away. The amount of eyewitness testimonies, and here I want to get specific with one of these examples. So specifically, the 3 witnesses were Oliver Cowdery, Martin Harris, and David Whitmer. These guys were hounded throughout their lives. All 3 of them, by the way, at one point or another, fell away from Joseph. They left the church. Oliver Cowdery and David Whitmer ended up returning to the church. Oliver Cowdery, right before his death, returned to the church, and he was getting ready to go out west to join the saints in Utah before he got ill. And it was on his deathbed that he testifies one more time of his experience of the angel and the golden plates. And then the David Whitmer and Martin Harris, maybe only one of the 2, but one of the 2 or both of them were there at his deathbed. And he said, don't forget your witness. Don't forget your promise. Like, until the end, this is what we do. And I heard a commentary recently that's like, that's really strange behavior. If these 3 guys, keep in mind, this is after the death of Joseph. These guys have
decades
away
later
from the church. And all 3 of them said things that weren't kind about Joseph. So they all, had they wanted to, it was the easiest thing in the world for one of them to say, hey, it was all a fraud.
Yeah.
He duped me, whatever. It was so easy. Any one of these guys could have made Joseph look like a fool. And all 3 of them So here's the example I want to jump forward to. So Oliver Cowdery testifies on his deathbed after having returned to the church. Martin Harris ends up making it to Utah, and he spends the remainder of his days. So this is after he falls away, gets rebaptized, goes out to Utah, spends the rest of his days going up and down the Wasatch Front in Utah, approaching strangers and saying, "Hey, do you know who I am? I'm Martin Harris. I'm one of the 3 witnesses of the Book of Mormon. As sure as you can see that axe over there, I saw the angel and I saw the plates."
Really? I didn't know that.
Yeah, he would just approach strangers and tell them that. That was like his trademark way of bearing his witness. As sure as you can see that sun, I saw the angel and the plates. And he just did that for the rest of his days. So cool. The third one that I want to focus on is David Whitmer. He did not return to the church, and he actually lived the longest. He lived until the 1880s. It was almost 50 years after the death of Joseph Smith that David Whitmer lived on. The amazing thing about David is that David never rejoined the church. And it is interesting to note that the year before David's death, he wrote a book, and the book was like For Seekers of Truth or something, and he sort of outlined his beliefs and different things. And in the book, he actually says quite a bit of negative things about the prophet Joseph. He and the prophet Joseph didn't agree on a lot of things. And did you know at one point, David Whitmer was given a blessing by the prophet Joseph, and the prophet Joseph told him that he would be the next in line after Joseph. I didn't know that either. So it's this really interesting thing that the Lord had potential blessings available for David Whitmer, and he chose a different path. And a lot of that choosing a different path came, I guess I don't know the history as well, but he disagreed with Joseph, I'm sure, on a lot of things. I'm sure like the failing of the bank in Nauvoo and different policies and different things probably eventually led him to end. Some historians think that he really loved the church when it was like being observed in people's living rooms. And then when it turned into like an organization with hierarchy, he didn't like it. It rubbed him the wrong way, you know? So a really interesting guy. And he, for 50 years after the prophet Joseph's death, doesn't come back to church and testifies over and over and over again of what he saw and what he beheld, to the extent, Christian, that he had it engraven on his tombstone. It's there in, I think it's Richmond, Missouri. And it has an engraving of a Bible and the Book of Mormon on the top of his tombstone. And then on the side, it says, "The record of the Nephites and the Jews are one. Truth is eternal." And I'm learning about this David Whitmer guy. And like, isn't that amazing? That's the thing about David Whitmer is you can't just like, he was like a mayor. He wasn't like a loony.
He wasn't an idiot. These guys weren't idiots.
Idiot.
Yeah.
It wasn't that he was just like so enamored by the prophet Joseph that he went along. He didn't like Joseph.
Yeah.
Not to mention Joseph had been dead for decades. Like, it would have been so easy. Like,
it would have been in his best interest to discredit the Book of Mormon.
That's the right way to say it. His career would have gone better. His businesses would have gone better had he discredited it. And instead, for all of his days, including until this day, because it's on his tombstone, he bore witness. And a couple days this week, as I've been learning about this, I just go to my wife and I'm like, "Catherine, I mean, I think it happened just like Joseph said it happened. This is wild. It's amazing." So if you need faith promoting history, study those witnesses. It's incredible stuff.
Yeah. That is amazing. There maybe isn't anything more they could have done to insist upon the truth of that vision that they had than what they did.
Yeah. I mean, they got threatened to be killed. Right? Like, At one point, Oliver Cowdery had a gun to his head. He's like, deny the Book of Mormon and we'll let you live. He had a gun pointed to his head when he was outside of the church. This is when he had left. And he wouldn't deny
He
it.
still wouldn't.
He's like, pull the trigger. I can't deny it.
Yeah.
I mean, like, that's the interesting thing is like you said, there are more witnesses to the validity of the Book of Mormon than we have to the resurrection of Christ. And like a really clear, huge asterisk there is like, we believe in, accept, and are so grateful for the resurrection of Christ.
Yeah. No, the crowning moment in human history, for sure.
We believe those witnesses. That's not the point. The point isn't to discredit that. But the point is, if you're going to accept those witnesses, you ought to investigate these ones.
Yeah. Yeah. People will often say things like this on these online internet threads. They'll say things like, there is zero evidence for the Book of Mormon, or there is zero archaeological evidence or literary evidence. It's just not true. Factually inaccurate, because there is so much evidence. They just, like, they can choose to not accept it, or you could debate the validity, but I don't know how you get past the witnesses.
Yeah.
I don't see a way around it. It's like they just believed it. They absolutely believed it to their last breath.
Yeah. The way around it is to not take it seriously. Like, you just have to kind of like not give it a second look. Yeah, they were duped. And you just kind of like throw it away. If you take it seriously, it's impossible to get around. You just can't get around it.
And like, if he, I always think this one's funny. And if he was a hypnotist, he could have done a lot better than suffering for 20 some odd years, persecutions. Like, he could have just had a lot more money and been a lot more popular. Like, what do you do with those powers? You start a church of struggling poor farmers who suffer and get, chased from town to town and exterminated. Like, no, that's not what you do with those powers. You rub the genie's lamp and you get rich. That's what you do.
Yeah. I've even seen that. Like, it's just historically so inaccurate, but they'll be like, yeah, Joseph just did all this to get crazy rich. I'm like,
yeah,
I
he could have done better.
I don't know if you've ever read a book. You've probably just read like a column in Reddit.
Yeah.
But I don't think Joseph was rich by anyone's standard. So yeah, beautiful stuff. And to me, has been very, very, very faith promoting to read church history. It's just remarkable.
Yeah, that thought always comes back to mind. It's people don't get in trouble because they know too much history. It's because they know too little church history.
Yeah. And I think that's really, it's just been my experience. There is, and it's fascinating. Like, my heart goes out to all the people who have read, the CES letter, who have read different things and who kind of feel confused, and then they feel misled, and then they feel betrayed, and then they start listening to different people who agree with the CES letter. And what I find interesting is that, like, I think that as we grow from youth to adult, there's like a natural deconstruction, a healthy deconstruction that needs to happen. For example, like, as kids, we cling to the idea that something is perfect or infallible. Whether you want that to be the Bible or you want that to be a prophet, like, you just want something to be perfectly concrete that you can cling to. And save Jesus alone, there's just not that. And so I think, like, going from youth to adult, you have to accept that. And for some people, if you're in that phase of like observing that, like, wait, it's not what I thought it was when I was a kid, it's because everyone lied to me. I actually have a lot of empathy for those people. Like, that's actually tragic and heartbreaking. And I think that would be a terrifying thing to go through. The crux of the matter, though, is that, like, that's not an observation of truth. What's happening is you're being, like, led along on a breadcrumb trail that's intentionally deceitful or unknowingly ignorant, one of the two.
Yeah.
And so I just hope to, like, within my sphere of influence, like, how can I help people have a healthy realization of like what is most in line with truth.
That's part of what this section is intended to be. It's as you and I learn, we want to share that with people because you guys come across this mudslinging online, and sometimes I see things on the internet and I'm like, they kind of have a good point. And then I explore it further, and they really don't. But initially, like it's just those hit and runs. It's the snarky internet comments. That's I don't really know how to respond to that. It's because they're not meant to be responded to. But so we're trying to take that and then figure out how we can think through these things. So hopefully that's helpful. It's been helpful for me to deconstruct that. And my thought is always, it's like when Jesus asks, he taught a sermon and then a bunch of people left because they were offended. And then he turns to his followers and said, will you leave also? And they say, where will we go? You have the words of eternal life. And that's those people who leave the church. Where are you going to go? What do you replace this with? Because you're going to worship a God, and there's no better God than Jesus Christ. And there's no better place to know Jesus Christ than in his church, where he mediates covenants to us. And they accept hedonism. And I don't know what you replace that with, but it's not something that's going to serve your life and bring you joy like the gospel of Jesus Christ will.
Yeah. And for those who leave the church to continue pursuing Christ, we're genuinely so happy that you're still pursuing Christ. Like, keep up the good work. But that's typically not the case.
Yeah. So our last section here is something the Spirit taught me recently. And I had a cool experience I wanted to share with you. Sometimes I read the scriptures and I learn a new truth. Sometimes I read the scriptures and my experience matches what I'm reading, where it's like, holy cow, I've felt that exact way, or I've seen that. It's the scriptures relate a truth to me that I have learned through my lived experiences. And I had one of those. It doesn't often happen because, I'm fairly ignorant and not well journeyed, but I had that experience. And on this podcast, I've tried to communicate frequently kind of my faith journey and how I've tried to hear and follow the voice of God, the Spirit of God, the Holy Ghost. And in my life, it's been this feeling of peace and joy and hope that pulls me towards certain choices. And as I follow that voice and make those choices that I'm pulled towards, my life gets better and I receive more joy. And so I've tried to communicate that a lot. And then I was reading in Doctrine and Covenants 11, 12, and 13, and it just articulated it the best I've ever heard. But this is exactly what I've been trying to communicate. And this is Jesus talking, and he says, and now verily, verily, I say unto thee, put your trust in that Spirit which leadeth to do good, yea, to do justly, to walk humbly, to judge righteously, and this is my Spirit. Verily, verily, I say unto you, I will impart unto you of my Spirit, which shall enlighten your mind, which shall fill your soul with joy. It was so cool. That has been my exact experience. My experience with the voice of God is that he pulls me to do good. And as I do good, I'm filled with joy. And that I'm just pulled more and more to do good, and I'm filled with more and more joy. It was so fun for me to see that and just like, yes, that's exactly it. That's been my life and the journey I'm on.
I love that. I love that. And the scriptures are just so cool, aren't they?
They get cooler the older I get. Cooler and cooler.
One thought that is more a response to your thought than it is my last thought, but I was listening to an interview this week. Jared Halverson, guy's incredible.
Jacob Hansen? Which
one?
one's?
No, Jared Halverson. He is the Unshaken guy.
The Unshaken guy. Yeah. Okay.
Yeah. And he was talking about, they were talking about the Joseph Smith translation and really all of Scripture and what it means to translate. And he was sort of bringing up this idea that he learned in divinity school, that is taking the text as close to the source as you possibly can, right? So if he used the example of a Bible, right, like Paul's letter to the Corinthians, right? So it's like, okay, we have this manuscript. Is there a manuscript that's older? Awesome. What would be older than that? Well, it would be his actual handwritten letter. Great. And that, well, I guess it would be like Paul's brain or if he like said it out loud to someone else or whatever. And then that before that is God. And so it's like getting it as close to the source as possible is actually a really interesting thing, because what he said was, all like scripture is coming from someone who felt things and thought things and received instruction from God, and they were tasked to put that on the paper. And so like they used their own words, they communicated the best they could to the audience they were trying to communicate to. And so it's interesting when you're like, oh, okay, so fill in the blank author of one of these scriptural texts, you could take one step closer to God if you understood what they were thinking and feeling at the time they wrote the words. And so it's interesting. I've sort of tried to practice that this week as I've read the book of like, okay, so if Nephi is telling us that his bow broke, what was he thinking and feeling at the time where he thought like, yeah, this is what they need to read about? What was he feeling and thinking, and anyways, it's like an interesting way to try and like dive into the story instead of just like taking the words and walking.
If it was Nephi, he was thinking about, how could I make everybody think I'm really strong and righteous? I snapped my bow in half with my great strength.
It was with my bicep.
Yeah. It is really interesting that we are infallible. In fact,
I think you meant fallible.
Yes, thank you. We are very, very fallible. We are fallible. We receive information from an infallible being, and it could be pure knowledge. It could just be pure truth directed to our mind, and we just interpret it slightly off. And that's likely what happens is we receive that with our experiences and our thoughts and our emotions, and then we write that down, and it's a reflection of what we received. Because I don't know that we can just take that and put it on paper, because we're not God. It comes through this vessel, which is imperfect and fallible. And prophets are the exact same way. The prophets of the Bible were the exact same way, and President Nelson is the exact same way, and Joseph Smith was the same way. Even the things that they wrote, Doctrine and Covenants, which we consider to be scripture, came through Joseph Smith, a man from God. God gave it to him, and so it may not be perfect. It still has, and as the Book of Mormon says, forgive the imperfections of man. It's like we do not by any means believe in sola scriptura, because the medium through which that comes is a human being, and they are fallible human beings, which is something I've been thinking about a lot recently. But
yeah, and it's just so fascinating to like, I think there's actually a lot of comfort in that. There's a lot of peace that comes from that. Like the idea is that it is God communicating to you or to me or Joseph or to President Nelson for the entire church. But like God speaks to Joseph in language that Joseph understood. He was an uneducated farm boy. And he grew up, so he became an uneducated farm man. But like he spoke to him in language that he understood. Would he have spoken to Albert Einstein in different language? Yeah. Right? Like he would have, and then their brains would have interpreted it differently, right? It's like so interesting to think about this idea that God's going to speak to us, but it's just the truth that you and I can read the exact same words that is like, love God, love thy neighbor. And I'm going to think like, oh, I should bring my neighbor cookies today. And you might think something completely different, right?
Yeah. It's almost that idea of light hitting a glass pyramid and it refracts into a rainbow. But like we can't absorb all of that. Maybe we only get the red, or maybe we're only getting the yellow, which is great. That's wonderful. But it's like we're just not capable of receiving and communicating all of that the way that God would, because we're not God.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, well, go ahead. It's your turn.
Yeah, I have one more thing. I got to close this thing though.
Yeah.
Oh, holy smokes, that was so bright. Okay. Yeah, so my what the Spirit is teaching me this week, it's interesting because I have been thinking a lot about what it means to be a peacemaker. And The interesting thing, I think, that is the misconception of most of us is that we think keeping the peace means you have to be like a pushover, which means you're probably weak. And it's interesting because what I've experienced is I've attempted to be a peacemaker this past few weeks, is that being a peacemaker means that you receive the mud to the face and you have the inner strength enough to say, I'm not going to let my ego respond to that one. I'm not going to let my pride respond to that one. I'm not going to let my wit respond to that one. I'm going to scrape all of that away and I'm going to respond with kindness. That's crazy.
That's against the commandments of the internet.
It's against the commandments of the internet. It is like, and it's certainly against the law of Moses. It's like, what do you mean? Throw the mud back, you know?
Stab his eye out, bro.
Yeah. But it's been this fascinating thing as I've contemplated, like, how can I be one who not just like seeks peace, but creates it in the comment section of the internet when people's deliberate goal is to destroy peace. It's not like they're just disagreements. Their purpose in being there is to tear peace down. Like they're just trying to cause chaos and discord. So how can you be one who creates a space of peace? And I think like fundamentally that's what it means. It's what the Spirit's been teaching me this week, is that like what it means is that you can't respond with ego. You can't respond with pride. You have to respond with something far more pure than that. And really, it's not about you at all. You're like scraping away all the responses that Travis would say. You know, Travis, get out of the way. Like, how would love itself? How would love respond? And a lot of times, like, if you were to go and look at my interactions with people this week on Instagram, it's almost like incoherent. People are just like, oh, here's a 5-gallon bucket of mud. And I'm like, wow, it's such a curious thing. You must study your scriptures a lot. Do you worship Christ too? And then they're like, oh, the 5-gallon bucket didn't do it. I'm going to fire from a rocket launcher this time. I'm like, wow, I admire how like tenaciously you hold to your faith. What an amazing thing. I think we might have to disagree with this one. And then they're like, that's it. Drop the nukes. You know, like it's crazy.
Let them have it, boys.
But if I'm being honest, there's been something like almost thrilling about the quest to be like, I will not let somebody rile me up.
Yeah.
I just won't let it.
Unrileable.
Yeah. And let me tell you, sometimes I need a few minutes because the knee-jerk reaction is always snarky, or it's always
son
ego.
Of a gun. Yeah.
Always. It always is.
You take it back.
And I wonder, you know, what being perfect, like, was Christ's knee-jerk reaction snarky, or is being perfect you don't feel that anymore? I don't know.
Yeah. I wonder if Jesus ever wanted to bring somebody's mother into the conversation.
I don't know.
Probably not.
Yeah, probably not. All I know is that he did at times use a sword. And so being a peacemaker doesn't mean like not standing up for truth. But I think there's a beautiful way to like absorb the things that people say things hoping that it cuts me deep. Yeah. Not even that it cuts my faith deep, but like it offends me. Like that's what they're trying to do. And it requires something to be like, I'm just not going to let that offend me. I'm going to respond in love and express truth. I got a ways to go, Christian.
Has it been working?
No. It's better for my soul. So in that sense, yes, it's working.
Yeah.
If the question is like, are people having changes of heart in the comment section of Instagram? I don't think so. But the conversations end. And they end while
the mudslinging stops.
Yeah. The mudslinging stops. So I guess in that way, like, yeah, extremely successful.
That's such a hard balance to strike because Colton Miller, who we both really like. Shout out to Colton. Come on
Yeah,
our
Colton,
podcast, dude.
I hope you see this. Come and hang out with us.
Open invitation. I'll even grow a beard. I would even grow a beard and shave my head to look like you if you came on the podcast.
Whoa, I'm gonna at him in this part for that. Hold you to it.
I but don't make me shave my head unless it's absolutely necessary for you to come on, in which case I will. So um I look at his comments section and there are literally hundreds of comments, most of which are snarky and mean. And it's like, as you read it, I start to feel myself getting a little bit heated. And I don't know how to interact with that while standing up for truth and being a peacemaker. I don't know how to do those two things. So my strategy has just been to not engage, which I don't think is a good strategy.
Well,
in many cases.
I might. Here's, I think the distinction is like, a peacemaker. I think a peacemaker actually does know how to pick their battles. For example, like if I were to walk between the red coats of the British and the blue coats of the Americans during a battle and be like, everyone put down your guns, like, you're gonna get killed.
Yeah.
Right? Like that's just like, that's
You're
not
the first guy down.
Yeah, that's just like not where a peacemaker should go and insert themselves. I think it's far more productive.
It's the bayonet fight between one-on-one guys. You just throw yourself in there.
You might be able to do that. Yeah. Bring your own sword though, you know.
Yeah.
But I think it's actually far more productive if, like, in the library or the tavern 3.5 months before that battle, can you help two brothers see that they're still brothers when they're about to go put on different colored coats? Like, that's where a peacemaker goes and picks their battle, I think. And so I have also been very selective, right? Like, I never comment, Colton, we love you, come and join us. But like, I never comment on Colton's either, because I feel like I may as well be getting dropped into Vietnam and like trying to make peace.
Yeah.
You know, it's like, I just don't think it works. Because with all due respect to Colton, he's not trying to sow peace in his comment section.
He's going with a sword. He's defending truth
Yeah.
with a sword.
Yeah, he wields a sword. So I typically don't jump into his, but I typically will jump in when somebody starts with peace and somebody else comes to try and stab peace with their sword. That's typically step in to try and encourage the side of peace rather than the bloody sword.
Yeah. Yeah. The meek shall inherit the earth, and the meek are those who have a sharp sword, know how to use it, but keep it sheathed until it needs to come out.
Yeah. And yeah, I guess I think the takeaway for me of a peacemaker and the ideology of a peacemaker is like, does the person you just had an interaction with, are they closer to Christ because they interacted with you? And I think if the answer is no, then what was the point of your interaction?
It's even more difficult because you're also speaking to an audience. So there is a one-on-one conversation, but then there's all the people who are reading the comments. And so you're not just talking to that one person, you're talking to thousands of eyeballs.
That is true. And so you're so true. You're so right. And in most cases, that's why it matters to continue engaging in the comment section, because you know that dozens or potentially hundreds of people are going to go through and read the comments after.
Yeah. And they need to see truth. They need to see peacemaking.
Yep. Peacemaking. And I think it's synonymous with continuing to stand for truth. Yeah. But I think if all they witness is mud being slung back and forth, then all the observer seeing is like, well, whoever's snarkiest wins.
And that undercuts the message of whatever the video is entirely.
Yeah. Who can say the snarkiest thing? Who can say the thing that was most insulting or most clever? Then it's like, it's not helpful anyway. But if they can see, interesting how one group of people seems to be just like machine gunning mud, and another group seems to be like standing solidly on a rock, absorbing the mud and like extending a shaking hand. Which
Yeah.
side do you want to listen to more? You know?
In the podcasts I've done, the last, I don't know, 5 or 6 that I can recall, there's been a very interesting theme. And that theme was that all of these people are doing something to spread the gospel, most of them via YouTube or social media. And they have all said that I just felt a call to do something more, which it's like, it's cool that that's the zeitgeist of our time right now. Is I think that the Spirit is just pressing on our hearts to do more and to share more and to let our lights shine. And what is cool about that is there is a you-sized hole in the fight that only you can fill. And what that looks like, I don't know, but I know that God knows. And if you have felt that call, come join us. We're trying to figure it out. There's a me-sized hole somewhere that I'm trying to find and fill, and I'm doing a poor job at it, but I think we're moving the right direction and slowly learning how to do it the right way. And if you feel the call, just come with us because we're all stumbling forward. Let your light shine. And the light that we hold is Jesus Christ, which is cool because it's not your light. You don't have to be absolutely wonderful. You just have to let Jesus be wonderful and hold him up.
Yeah. Amen. Echo. And I think one of the most beautiful things about this process that you and I have learned is that like we're still not very good at this. And it has been enough. And we hope to get better and we hope to grow. But the fact that we've started, both evidenced by our own hearts, but also evidenced by things that other people have said, like it's been enough. And now we're trying to get better at it.
Yeah. Come join us. Let your light so shine.
We meant to have this be 25 minutes. I think we probably hit an hour. So
all right. Well, we'll wrap it up there. These will be shorter and better. We will be more attractive in future episodes. Come join the rebellion. Stay with us. Let your light shine.
Thanks for joining this episode of The Holy Rebellion. We'll see you next week.